Well, as you're all aware, a couple of years ago, we had a number of roundtable sessions and produced 12 pieces of guidance. This is obviously a meeting to update that guidance, but also we've got a slightly different approach. So I'm going to ask George to put this meeting and the upcoming meetings in context with what we did before and how we're slightly modifying how we're looking at things now.
Okay, good. Thank you, Richard. All right, I'll just share my screen. So I think there's probably quite a few people that aren't familiar with BIM4Housing. So if I just cover that initially, basically we've got about 500 members overall now. And what we're focused on isn't so much 3D modeling, which is the way people often think about BIM. It's about managing information better. So what information do you need to make development, design, construction, operations easier? And what we've got 6 working groups that meet a couple of times a year, and they define what information would make their jobs easier, and also to try and identify things that are common to all of them. And then once we've then defined that, we identify work streams who look at those different aspects. So for example, we've had a team that have been looking at data management, which is broadly what we're covering today. Also, we've got people that have been looking at process to look at how we can classify things. Fire safety is the principal goal that we're trying to achieve today with the 12 critical asset types. We're also doing work on sustainability, if anybody's interested in that, and also how we can have a digital record. So all of that is under the BIM4Housing banner. And what I wanted to do was just put quickly in context some of the information. So what we've discovered is that what we obviously need to know is information about the building, the spaces that are in the building, the systems that are supporting those activities and spaces, and the assets and the products that are satisfying them. But one of the challenges is you've got people that have got different perspectives. What's needed for specification and design is quite different than what is needed for construction, and even more so when you then get into operations and life cycle. So all of them require different information at different levels of detail, and what we need to do is make sure that we're capturing the level of detail that's needed, but then filter it back so that people can only see the information that they need. One of the exercises that we're going to go through today is to try and identify which of this information is fixed and which is variable, which needs somebody to read it and interpret it, or is active and can therefore machine actionable. So one of the exercises today is to look at the fantastic information that the previous groups have put together and then see how we want to classify that information. One of the points about this is that what do you do with that information? Because it's all very well having data, but what's the point of it? And 2 of the legislative things now are to have fire risk assessments and safety case reports. The challenge is that they're only correct at the moment of time that they're created, and they're also an opinion. Whereas what we actually need is a fire safety management system and also a safety management system. So that's really what the legislation requires, not just a document. So when things change, those risk assessments need to be rerun. And also to break out the things that might naturally be changing, and tying them back to individual assets. So where did we start on this journey? Well, we started this about 3 years ago, where we had a consortium of people who are subject matter experts who started to try and pull together some standardization in terms of asset data, and create some templates that could then be used either on new build or for existing properties. And by organizing and structuring data properly, it means it can be used in any software application. This is the exercise that we started with HACT. So the Housing Association Charitable Trust was asked by the housing associations to basically bring together the asset data that had been compiled in many different systems, and really try and make sure that there's some degree of standardization as to what do you call a dry riser, for example, or an AOV. So here, for example, we've got a number of different terminologies that are used. You've got an AOV, an opening vent, or a smoke vent. Now, by working on this collectively, we can then tie it back to a uniclass definition there. And therefore, we've got a degree of standardization that we can then work to. By doing that, we can also then tie that back to maintenance standards like SFG 20. So that exercise resulted in 245 asset types overall. And of those, we identified 71 that were fire related and 152 that were safety related. That includes the fire related ones. So one of the things that is a challenge is, okay, you know it's a fire related asset. What information do you really need to know about it? Over and above what it is, and these are a general sort of COBE, what often in the industry, the BIM industry is called standard COBE. So these are attributes that are common to any type of product, irrespective of whether it's an AOV, a fire door, or a damper. So the idea of this is to really drill down to the detail. That's the big piece of work that we need help with, to actually identify what is it about an AOV that we really need to know in a machine readable form. And it may sound pretty easy to do, and you think that BIM's sorted it all out, but there are lots of different libraries that are created for different purposes. As I said right at the beginning, you've got different people that need different information for different purposes. So, for example, IFC, which is the BIM standard, we've already populated a lot of asset types with IFC data, but that can be meaningless to other people. BIMHawk has done it for SIBSE, for the Chartered Institute of Building Services Engineers. We've also got NRM, and the distribution industry, the wholesalers and builders merchants, they use something called ETIM. So all of these are very relevant classifications and property sets, but it's a matter of what's included for what purpose. For an automatic opening vent, these are the IFC attributes that have been selected, and this is machine readable information. That's the whole point of putting things in IFC, and that means that when that information is collected, it can be collected in a machine readable format and therefore automatically tested and validated. But really, is it the case that you would really need to know what the wind loading is, wind load rating is, or the mechanical load rating actually as machine readable data? It may be that we can satisfy that by having a data sheet that's got it that a human can read. So that's really what I'm saying, the difference between active and passive data. So as part of this exercise, we were asked by L&Q to lead the asset information group. The Golden Thread initiative was led by L&Q to advise the government as to what the Golden Thread should contain. And there was 10 working groups, and I led the asset and survey information group. And the question that we were asking was, what data do we need for an AOV, for example? And the answer that we typically got from talking to experts was, it depends. It depends where the AOV is going. It depends what it's doing. It depends on the fire strategy. It depends on how it's being maintained. And everything drops back to, in terms of liabilities, back to building regs. Now, unfortunately, although that is the major requirement that people will have to meet, there are 800 standards referred to in building regs. So it's just an overwhelming amount of information. So that's why we try to focus on the 250 or so asset types. And then this exercise is to try and address that. So this is the exercise that we went through. A lot of really good effort by some great people over the last about 18 months ago. And we've got publications for AOVs, fire doors, dry risers, emergency lighting, etc. And we're going through this exercise on each one so that we can actually identify what the asset is and also then look at it in a context. So the final bit of this is really looking at this not from an individual asset perspective, but what is that asset doing? Because that's really what the HSE are looking for. They're not looking to see whether the fire doors are perfect, because what they want to know is, how is it going to perform to deal with a hazard? So in this particular case, we've got fire breaking out in a kitchen, and we've got a number of different measures that are in place, or the HSE call them treatments, to protect against smoke spreading. First of all, you've got the compartmentation. And with the best will in the world, no matter how good the fire doors are, if the penetration seals aren't working, then it's pointless, really. So all of those have to be considered in context. Also, you've got to make sure that the smoke control system's working. And one of the points that the teams made is, okay, you're supposed to check the fire alarm once a week, but the smoke alarm should also be tested once a week, because it's a critical area. That's Paul White that suggested that to us. And also, you've got to make sure the detection system's working. So the overall objective here is to have it so that we can have the parameter data in a form, the key parameter data in a form that can then be connected through to maybe CAD systems or procurement systems, and also the new FIRE. So this is BS 8644. This data here can also be added as a different view according to what's required. So I'm just going, but just before I pass over to Richard, I'm going to just cover this, which this is the exercise that we went through. Oh, in fact, actually, that's the wrong slide.
Yeah.
I'll come back to that in a second. I'll pass over to you and just now, Richard.
Okay, well, we'll dive straight in, because there's quite a lot to cover. Just, you want to put the document up? Great. You want to scan through until we get to question 1. I'm not going to bother with the early stuff. This is about the setting and the context, which George has covered anyway, but this will obviously need updating. So the first question we had was, what risks does an AOV mitigate? Now, can everybody see that? Anybody not see that?
That's okay.
I'll have a quick look through there. I'm not going to go through it line by line, or we'll be here till Christmas. A lot of this stuff was put together. It wasn't all done in the meetings. We had sub meetings, phone calls and emails, and flying all over the place. Anything there anybody disagrees with?
So the purpose of this is to look at things from the perspective of what the asset is doing rather than just simply the condition of the asset.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
looking at things from a point of view of what risk is it mitigating, and therefore being able to then how that all feeds into a full risk management process.
The bullet point on risk of safety failure, you only really with an AOV get one hit. It has to fail safe. Is it worth underlining that there?
Sorry, is this risk of system failure?
Risk of system failure, you know, the AOV not working. Yeah, it only happens once probably in its lifetime when that one occurrence happens, you know. So failure, that any system should be designed to fail safe.
No, absolutely. Yeah, that's a very good point. I'll tell you what, I don't know who was speaking actually.
I think it was David.
David.
Sorry, I beg your pardon.
Yeah, it's all right, no worries. Listen, what we do, just let me cover this. We're recording this, and the video will be available, as will high point notes of the meeting. Now, the high point notes include the chat. Yeah. So if you've got any comments that you want us to look at, even if it's you don't want to actually speak yourself, just put them in the chat, because they will be seen and they will be put in. So I would ask David, please do interrupt me and say things. I'm not saying that, but David, would you put that in the chat so we don't lose it?
Many apologies. It's something.
No, David, I want to be interrupted. I'm very happy to be interrupted. No, believe me. That's part of it. I want your input. Input. I'm just saying that's a really good point. So could you put it into the chat so we don't miss it?
I'll do it as we talk. As I don't talk.
No, it's good. Otherwise, it gives me a break, doesn't it?
Thanks. Sorry.
Okay. Anybody else got any points on that question 1A?
Yeah, I'd like to question the risk of system failure. What are we saying there? An AOV, in terms of an AOV, how is that mitigating the risk of system failure? Are we talking about the AOV system? In which case, you're not mitigating that, are you?
No. System failure is a risk that would prevent the AOV working properly.
Okay, so that's not a risk that the AOV is mitigating, then, is it?
No.
I think it's a very good point. Yeah. So.
Right, that's in the wrong place, isn't it? It should be on 1B.
Yes.
Right.
That's a very good point.
Go down to 1B.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well done.
Yeah.
Right, let's go into 1B then. So, to what risk is an AOV itself susceptible to? What are the risk issues that are going to affect an AOV and prevent it working properly?
So this was based on people's experience of, for example, somebody going and smoking in a corridor and then forcing the AOV open to let the smoke out. This is anecdotal, this is anecdotal that the experts have told us actually happens, and that can obviously damage the AOV from working. Or I think another example was that the AOV that was a roof light was also a roof light. It was used for regular access to the roof, and it hadn't really been designed for that level of opening. So, yeah.
Yeah. We've got this split down. We've got materials.
Also, they're now using AOVs as daily ventilation, which is overuse of the actuators.
Oh, right, that's interesting.
Okay. Would you put that in the chat for me, please?
Yeah, just to pick up on that point. So Ian Doncaster here. The question about using them for daily vent, that depends on if they're properly specified. So if they're properly specified, there's no reason why that's not okay. But if they're not properly specified, then that certainly is a risk. And again, like you say, one of the other big risks is if you don't allow people to ventilate a corridor when they're smoking there when they're not supposed to, they may well break it, and that is quite a common issue we've seen.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Ian, with that, so that obviously, when that AOV was installed, it might be that the designers hadn't anticipated it was going to be used to that level. So that essentially is a change of use, isn't it?
That would be, yeah.
That's
so
an interesting
the
point.
risk would be change of use or change of application, possibly.
Yes. Can we type that in?
Yeah, could you put that into the chat for
into
me?
the chat? Yeah.
As you'll see, we are so dynamic in these meetings that Jess is actually putting provisional updates onto the document as we speak.
Brilliant.
I haven't seen anything in there for the risk of fall. Some AOV windows, they open on chain actuators and they open vertically. So if there's no railings there, there's a risk of fall. And the height of the railings has to be a minimum of, I think it's 105 centimeters.
So would is that therefore a parameter that we need to accommodate in the next stage down, which is the construction?
Well, I think that there is another level of risk, isn't there? There's the risk that the AOV mitigates. There's the risks that the AOV itself is susceptible to, but there's also the risk that the AOV causes
to others
through use.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
And falls, finger trapping, all those things fall into that category.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, I'm going to say, would you put that into the chat so we can get it up on?
Thank you.
One quick thing about the fail safe. So Ashley here. So you're saying about ideally they should be fail safe, in theory then to fail safe to open. If we've got an AOV window with its friction stays on it, you're not going to get a fail safe to open unless it's mechanically driven, which then it wouldn't be a fail safe open.
Does any of your other experts have a view on that?
Yes, can I quickly come in on that? In 1989, I patented a gravity opening vent because the problems that I found on 8 blocks in Croydon, and they were 8 out of the 12 that were found fire safe after Grenfell, incidentally. What we found there is that windows, the opening vents, these were the opening vents to give clear, fresh air to common single staircase on the 8 blocks. They were hopper type windows, opened at the top and inwards so that the fresh air came in the bottom and smoke went out the top. Fairly simple, held with magnets. We found that the opening springs, gas springs in some of them, and ordinary steel springs as well, were rusted, hadn't been tested for so many years. They were rusted up, they'd lost their nitrogen in them, so they didn't work. So I needed a force to open a window in a vertical, a pivot window, and the only 2 natural forces in that time, and this is why I got the patent, was either pressure or gravity. How do you open a vertical window with the center of gravity going downwards on that? Well, I put an offset hinge on that so that when the magnet released, the weight of the window opened the window itself, and that's what I got the patent for. So there are these issues to that's why I made the point about the fail safe.
Has anybody adopted that, David?
I had a very bad deal with a manufacturer at the time, and I just parked it. But actually, I've gone. That was called, from the AOV. My inventive step was GOV, which is gravity opening vent. I currently have claims that I'm going to, I want to work with some others, and possibly there's people on here that can come in on this with a smart opening vent. Because
David, that's brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, but I think we need to press on, otherwise we'll
of course. Okay,
so let's move, scroll down a bit, Jess. Right, we've got here like risk. This is about risk about the building actually moving, causing shrinkage, water damage.
So if people could have a look through those and see if there are ones that we need to challenge. Or add to, if in your experience you've got other things that you've come across.
Can I pick up on a comment there? Risk of detritus in shafts. The use of AOV can be a very widely used and misused term. If we've got a smoke vent going into a shaft, it's likely to be a smoke control damper, not an AOV.
Okay.
So I don't know whether we need to be careful about that we don't lead people down the wrong path.
Yeah. Will, you're our principal coordinator on this. What do you think? Should that be removed?
Yeah, we historically we've used the construction industry has used this term AOV, and I think approved document B calls up an AOV as an overall umbrella phrase for automatic opening vent. As Ian's quite rightly pointed out, there are different types of automatic opening vent, principally led by application. So if the automatic opening vent is at the top of a stair or at the end of a corridor to atmosphere, directly to atmosphere, typically that would fall under the category of an NSHEV, a natural smoke heat exhaust ventilator, which is covered under EN 12101 Part 2. If, as Ian said, it was an AOV going into a vertical shaft inside a building, then then that would be a smoke control damper. Still an AOV, but a smoke control damper, which falls under the product standard EN 12101 Part 8. So there's two examples of ultimately what this points to is we need clarification of the various types of AOVs.
Well, we've got a piece of guidance for smoke control dampers, haven't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're kind of splitting them out. So maybe that should be removed, and we'll make sure it's in the other one, perhaps.
Well, I think actually it's a valid point. It's just got we're at the risk of splitting hairs here, really. If you just deleted in shafts, then it would be fine, because there is a risk of stuff falling on vents and jamming over time. So if you just take the shafts out, then the question goes away.
Brilliant.
Is there anybody unhappy?
No, not the whole thing. Just take, just the shaft.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That was what I was sort of alluding to in that as Will has said, and Will and Connor, it's what we do all the time. So yeah, that makes absolute sense to me.
And I think as a note, just to go back at the very start, when we put a document together with definitions, we need to be clear to the reader that an AOV is kind of all encompassing, and it's needs to be recognised what the application is, which will determine the direction of which guidance is used.
Yeah.
Because we've specifically got this smoke control damper guide as well. It really does sort of make that split between between AOVs as a generic sort of term and AOVs as a more specific application.
Yeah, I think the biggest risk you want here is the risk of someone installing a product that isn't actually a certified AOV and presenting it as being an AOV.
Yes. Okay, should we press on?
Yeah, let's move down to the next section.
So I've got one quick one quickly on that about the you've got here about the roof light AOVs being used for access and being overly used. Well, surely now we're doing a weekly testing on AOVs, and you've got a 10-story building with a roof hatch or something like that. That's getting tested 10 times a week. Being used for access maybe once every 2-3 weeks. Is it going to make much more of a difference on the lifespan of an actuator?
I'm intrigued that you're saying that they're going to be inspected once a week. Is that the case?
If we're doing a weekly testing on AOVs, then the AOV will be tested once a week. So if we're doing one per floor, let's say a 10-story building, then the head of stairs, head of shafts are going to be activated 10 times in that weekly test.
No, I appreciate that. I've just not heard that that it's going to be weekly. I said it earlier because Paul White
that was
raised
a recommendation of ours. Yeah.
Okay. Well, from conversations with the IFC, they're recommending to us, obviously, as an IFC thing that we advise our customers, they should be doing a weekly test since the 1st of January for fire safety order.
Oh, that's interesting. Thank you for letting me know that. That's because I'm confident that SFG 20, which is the maintenance standard, they don't. They've not caught up on that. So that's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
Wayne, you got your hand up. Hello, you're muted, Wayne. You're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. Testing for AOVs is as the manufacturer's requirements, unless it is basically stated where you have a break glass unit to activate any fire alarm system, i.e. Fire alarm or activating for door exits. Them are the only times when you need to be servicing weekly.
There's a difference in servicing and inspecting, isn't there?
Yeah. You can do a visual inspection weekly, but there's no, unless you have a break glass or override unit, there is no compulsory inspection, no compulsory testing needed, unless there is a break glass.
Unless there's a break glass, which most systems have got a form of activation switch on them on every floor. So would that then, if they have got an activation switch, an override switch, would they then need to do a weekly test on that switch?
Yeah.
Which 90% of the buildings and the systems in the country will need a weekly test then.
Yeah, great.
Okay, so I think we're in agreement there. Let's move down now to question 2, because this is the one where we're going to go in rather more detail than we did last time.
Okay, shall I?
Yeah, do you want to do this, George? Could you know your?
Yeah, sure. So the purpose of this was to really try and identify what information we ought to be gathering that the experts felt was necessary to ensure safety. So one of the exercises with this was really a structured sort of brain dump of the experts to say, what are we doing in terms of specification, construction, installation, maintenance? So what information is needed at each stage? And to look at that, we embarked on the idea of trying to do it in a machine readable format so that it could then be reused. So what I'm just going to do, if I may, Jis, is just share my screen for a moment, because at the end of the day, we're all putting this work in, and it's a matter of trying to do something with it that then becomes usable. So what we've done is that this is work that Will and the team led last year, and that was to look at each of the particular attributes in that document and identify who's actually responsible for them, making them happen, who's accountable, who's been consulted, and who needs to be informed. So this is I think probably most of you are aware of RACI. So that was the methodology that we sought to operate on this. Now, I don't think we're not going to try and cover this today, because I think this is more of a I think we need probably a separate session on this, but we can share with you what the team did when they went through this originally. And the point about it is that it's then tying back the information so that you only get what you need for a particular purpose. But the thing I'd like to draw your attention to is this one here, which is whether something's passive or active. And what we're thinking now is that rather than all of this information being machine readable, which would be nice, a lot of it is probably in data sheets. So therefore, if we can say which of the properties could be as data sheets, and which can be which needs to be active, in other words, it's going to be machine readable, that's a way forward with identifying, well, really sorting out the wood for the trees, as it were. So this is an exercise that I think that we can go through quickly as we're going through the various different points. So yeah.
So we'll identify. We'll go through the points individually on this question.
Yes.
And identify whether they're passive or active. Can I just, Wayne, you got your hand up?
Yeah, my query was about lockouts on the systems, on AOV systems. I didn't see anything detailed regarding lockout. And basically, what lockout is if it's triggered on one floor, it won't open on another floor.
So would that be information about the AOV or information about the? Is that a risk?
It's about design and risk.
Okay, so
yeah, so could you put that in the chat, Wayne?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, could I add to that? It's in Doncaster. Just to sort of add to that point, that's a system thing rather than a specific AOV product thing. So that's about the performance of a system. That's absolutely right. And if you do have a day-to-day system, then you'll want to close everything down and only have the vent open on the floor that is the floor of fire incidents.
Yeah.
So those are system things rather than AOV things. So I don't know where we would pick that up, because the performance is of a system ultimately, not just the individual item.
It's how it's programmed as well.
And yeah, of course,
how it's interfaced. That's basically how it works. So if you have a standalone system, you can have more than one controller for each floor, but they have got to be interfaced so that when one's activated, it will not allow the other one to activate. If it picks up a fire on that floor, it will still trigger and send a signal back, but it will not activate to open the shaft or the AOV.
Will, could I ask you to
adjudicate?
Adjudicate, or not adjudicate. I absolutely agree with the system thinking. I'm just trying to figure out where we put it. Is it in the specification section?
Fundamentally, it is part of the cause and effect. Ian's right. If we're looking at the discrete product, the AOV, that is a function of what it's told to do. But it should be in the cause and effect of what it's, well, by nature of the description, the cause and effect. What are the triggers and what's the effect? So that would be my answer. It needs to be included in the cause and effect.
Yeah, we've got the cause and effect, I'm pretty sure. There we are. Yeah, inspection, cause and effect, protocols.
Sorry, just one thing from me. Should there not be a separate section there for design? Because obviously the whole purpose of, you know, what kind of leads this is going to be that initial design, which I think was where Wayne was coming from, is that, you know, you can have all the products in the world and you can have all of the, you know, inspections, maintenance, but ultimately it comes down to there's got to be a separate section in there for design and that cause and effect and what that system is actually designed to do in line with the fire strategy and other supporting documentation. So
and commissioning, because that is where that is the final part, is where they commission that system. and ensure that that system is working correctly to what it has been designed.
Yeah,
So-
we do have a section on commissioning, I think. If you scroll down,
If
I think where this gets a little bit confused is obviously from a you know, like a systems house or an integrator perspective, it's design, installation, commissioning. So every element has its own requirements. So, you know, I get there's obviously other bits to be taken into account, but I think if you separated them out and make it a little bit more specific to those elements, then that just might be a little bit clearer.
Maybe it's asking if it's compatible to for the information that you want to have. Is it compatible to carry out lockout? That might be what you want to ask. That might be one of the questions, the risks.
You're absolutely right. What we've tried to do over the sort of last 2 years we've been working on this is, rather than go from a top-down approach, it's actually looking at from the product point of view, because ultimately you guys have got these products in your buildings and they need maintaining, and we've got to make sure they operate correctly. So the kind of methodology that we've tried to do here is, rather than go from a system design down, we've actually picked products and gone, okay, that specific unique product, what's the information that needs to go in to make sure it's specified right, but then goes out to make it work right. So you're absolutely right. I mean, it's not a disagreement. It's just that we went round in circles and circles, and we can't generate a whole system design document here. So that's why it's actually, if we try and get in the mindset of going, let's go for the product, and then you're absolutely right. We need to know what's going to trigger the product. We need to know what information the product's got to give out, etc., etc. And that's, so we're flipping the hierarchy and building up a different way.
There's also AOV systems where the actuators are integral to the frame of the window. How are they serviced? They cannot be maintained. Items like that information needs to be specified and provided, because once that is installed, that's a cost. That's a high cost to have to incur if you can't then service that equipment.
Wayne, would you mind? Obviously, we this is fantastic. I'm really finding this helpful. But if you could jot that down, because we're not experts, we're relying on you guys to share your knowledge, and obviously the benefit of this as well is that if we can feed this back up to maybe construction companies who are procuring your services, then there's an opportunity for them to think a little bit more about what they're asking you to do.
Yeah.
So if you could help with that, that would be really useful. And as Will has said, one of the challenges that we've got with the golden thread is that it's just enormous. The number of ways in which you need to look at this information is just completely overwhelming. So what we're trying to do is boil it down into some things that are practical and usable, which you can then say, okay, let's look at the specification. One of the challenges that we've got at the moment, for example, is that as part of the golden thread, you're supposed to have the performance specification and also the prescriptive specification held against the product that has been installed. Now, the challenge with that is that I've spoken to MBS about this, and MBS produced Chorus, which is probably the most widely used specification system. And they've explained that an MBS specification can run to 1,500 pages, and it can have hundreds of products mentioned in it as well, all of which are then referencing off to different standards. So we must find a way of simplifying this. Otherwise, all that we're doing is we're not providing, for example, asset managers with the information that they need to keep the building safe.
We're
being very focused and drilling down as much as we can. So let's get on with that, or we're never going to finish.
Carry on, Richard.
Sorry, but right, let's go back up to the beginning of question question 2, Jez. Where are we? Right, requirements. Has anybody got anything that they think should be added or changed in requirements?
You're very welcome to make any comments that you have on the documents that we've already sent out. And if you want them in a Word format, happy to provide that, because at the end of the day, it's your knowledge. And obviously what you do here could influence the way in which you get commissioned.
Okay, I'm gonna right. We're going to move down to specification. Have a look at that. Oh, George, do you want to do the active or passive on these questions?
That would be ideal.
Right, sorry, I'm jumping ahead.
If we can.
Right, let's do that then.
Well, shall I pull up my spreadsheet again, because we've got all of these in.
Yeah, do it on that. Yeah, that's a good idea, isn't it? That's for question 2. We'll do it on your spreadsheet because they're there anyway.
Yeah.
Excuse me, is it, sorry, this is Spencer from Origin. Is it worth actually specifying the requirements for evidence of competency and training for installers, and also
we've got a section on that.
Yeah, we've got a section. We've got it's one of our competency and installations. One of the sections we've already got in the document. We'll be coming on to that.
Okay.
Okay.
So can everybody see my screen? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, what I've done here is I've said really the AOV's got to meet the required standards. So I think that's passive, because it's something that you read something and interpret it. This information here, a description of the main components, their number, location. Now that could be just as a document, but ideally it should be active. It should be something that is machine readable, I think. So could you just take a look down these and just see whether my guesstimate of what I think, and I'm not an expert, do you think that's about right?
George, is it fair to say the approach you've taken is you've taken a standard product data sheet, which is essentially generic, therefore passive, but in the specific project that product is applied to, that becomes active? Is that kind of the differentiator you've used?
No, it's more about if there's information that you've got on data sheets already, then we probably don't need you to provide it as active data, if that makes sense. That's my logic. So in other words, if you can provide a data sheet that basically covers the type of system that the AOV is part of, so it's in the specification, say, that can be passive. Whereas it might be that the traceability of the product needs to be active. I'm just trying to boil it down. Have you got one of your technical?
It depends if the information is going to change or not, isn't it?
Yes, that's true.
The stuff on a data sheet is static.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's passive information.
Yeah.
If it's something that is going to change, like George said, traceability, that's got to be ideally machine readable, because we're calling it active information because it's not static. Does that make sense to you, Will?
Yeah, but it's possibly even clearer than that, because putting a building operator's hat on, they are dealing with actual unique assets. There might be lots of AOVs on a project, but each one is unique and it's got to work. So actually what we're talking about, I think, is static information, which is generic data sheets, but then it's asset specific information, which is dynamic.
Yes, definitely. That's exactly right.
Exactly.
So commissioning information, for example.
Ian Doncaster.
Sorry, most of those things would be on a drawing. There'd be a schematic and a drawing because they're fixed things, all the layouts, the number of AOVs isn't going to change, the number of dampers isn't going to change. The cause and effect shouldn't change. So all those things should be fixed.
Yeah, okay, so they're passive then.
So they should be passive, not active.
It depends really on what if you think that it shouldn't be possible, it shouldn't be necessary to be able to locate where things are without having to manually read it. It depends really on what your preference is. Are you with me?
Well, again, that would probably should be on a drawing.
You can't. A drawing is passive, isn't it?
But then, if you actually change the design of your system, that's one of the issues you do come across is when people change your building layout, and then the AOV or the smoke ventilation smoke control system needs to change. That is when you do see issues sometimes when people have refurbished a building but not understood what's there originally because they just didn't understand.
And whether the building's shared, because some buildings can be one complete building with 2 entrances, and that AOV is shared by both sections of that building.
Well, that's the landlord's whoever is the responsible person for the common area. So well, yeah, you may well be a leaseholder or something in a building, but the common area will be under the jurisdiction of one person who has to be responsible for it.
I think it comes back to what
that depends. That depends on whether you've leased out what levels. I could be one landlord that own levels 1 to 3, and then another landlord could be in control of levels 4 to 7.
But if it's a common area that has some smoke control in it, then it doesn't matter who needs the rest of it. Whoever owns the common area is responsible.
You'd be responsible for your demise.
Sorry. Let's focus on the questions, and then when we've got a point of discussion, and it's very focused, isn't it, rather than quite so general. So
I would say that the location of things, in particular fire critical things, should be active. Invariably should be active. Yeah.
Surely they're fixed though. So why would they be active if they're fixed?
Because they need to be machine addressable. People want to be able to search for things. People want to be able to also update information. If you're having if you're having things inspected, you need to be able to update the information about that particular asset from whatever inspection's been done. So, yeah, I think probably we may disagree on that, but certainly from a BIM perspective and an asset management perspective, we really don't want to have to rely on having to go off and read a schematic to find where something might be. That's really the feedback that we're getting. But anyway.
David, you got your hand up.
Yes, interesting point. Active, what you were just talking about. There may be active, maybe for several different reasons, or any number. One may be where it's located. One may be possibly moving. Even a fixed object, as you say, George, needs to be active because you need the the information. So it's almost an active passive. I don't know what you would sort of, or a passive active or whatever. You know, it's what that sort of category sits on the fence.
Yeah, the differentiation that I'm talking about is the information itself, whether it's likely to ever change.
Yes.
Is the information about something likely to ever change? If it is likely to change because of maybe a status, or it's been inspected, or it may be replaced. Therefore, that is what I would say is something that we need to hold active information against.
Yes, even though it's even it's stuck in a single position.
Yeah. We're not saying it's active because we're not saying it's mobile.
No.
What we're saying is that the data about it is
possible to
change.
Is likely to change.
Yes.
Yeah.
So something like the design would be active because it could change.
Yes.
Maintenance regime is going to be active because you're always recording new information.
Absolutely.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Servicing
Sorry.
and
Can we get back to the questions?
Sorry.
Right. Are we at the top?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Yeah, that's the top. Yeah. So.
Should that first one, the AOV, meets a relevant standard, that shouldn't be passive because that standard is liable to change. It's liable to be updated or new revisions. So it needs to be something that can change.
That would be a different.
But is it likely to change now, or are they going to introduce a new book? They would introduce a new book, so that would give us time to change that to the new standard, what you're going to meet.
Yeah.
Knowing our luck, they'll probably just change.
Yeah.
Rainey, you got your hand up.
Hello, thank you for that. I'm just wondering. Obviously, if this system is going to be universal and used by a lot of people, from a fire safety perspective, and this is just a thought. I mean, if you classify things passive and active, it's very difficult to understand. I mean, perhaps I don't know if it's possible in the system, but would it not make more sense to have these definitions changed to something like static and dynamic, so that you have an understanding that, look, this is a static system, it's not going to change as fixed, or it's dynamic, perhaps able to be adapted or changed based on application or based on standard. I just feel that the active and passive definitions that you're setting here is likely to cause a lot of confusion for users.
Happy to change that. The reason we've used passive and active is that's terminology that is used in the fire industry.
Maybe static and active, George.
Static and dynamic.
No, passive is universally used.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we understand passive and active fire applications, passive fire safety and active fire safety, but not really as you would apply it to these definitions that you have here.
Okay. In principle, yeah. The important thing is to consider these as to what do we need as machine readable. That's probably a better way of saying it. Machine readable or editable, on what is unlikely to change. That's probably a better way of defining it, Bernie, if that's okay.
But then it's what people want to report on. That's what you want to devise. What people want the information from. So some people might want just information regarding the type of AOV system it is, and then other people might want information about the documentation. So it depends on the end user on how they want that information delivered to them.
Well, Will, do you want to step in on there?
It's really interesting, the discussion, but we've got to, I guess it's confusing. We've got to remember we're not talking about the systems, we're talking about the data about the systems.
Absolutely.
This is simply about the information. It's not about the systems themselves. And I completely get it. Passive and active is misleading, because anybody in the fire industry, like everybody in this room, has just gone, that's to do with the product. It's actually not what to do with the data. So I think that's a great suggestion. We probably do need to come up with a better way. Static and dynamic, again, we see that in specifications talking about systems. So I think it needs to be clearer that we're talking about the information about the assets in the first instance, and how we then say whether it's 1 or 0 is down to us to decide. But I think we're making it difficult for ourselves by not talking about the data.
I think you're right, but I think let's not spend the meeting talking about terminology. we can sort that out outside, can't we? Let's focus on what we're here to do, get through these questions. We'll name it afterwards. Somebody said fixed and variable, put on the notes.
Yeah, that's okay.
Anyway, whatever we call it, we know what we mean now. So on the page that's showing there, the GIS is showing there, is there anything on there that anyone disagrees with George's classification?
I'm quite happy to share this, and let's get other people's view on it.
George, where's your thing gone?
Which thing?
Well, we've got the document back. Have you stopped
really?
sharing? Yeah.
Not knowingly. Sorry.
Right. So I'm going to work on the basis that nobody disagrees with George's classifications on that bit. So do you want to scroll up, George?
Okay. Well, yeah. I'm very happy for people to question and challenge things, but as Richard said, we've got to get through these.
17.
Yep.
Item 17, evidence of testing against specific AOV performance criteria. That can change because depending on what your readings you get back from the system and how that data is going to be stored.
Okay. Make that active.
Right, well done.
How would that be delivered, by the way, Wayne?
You're doing tests to make sure that the AOV is always able to make do the makeup air, i.e. take the air out, and bring in new air. You want to make sure that it's always doing it within that time frame. That can change. That can change.
No. What you're saying is that's part of the inspection procedure.
Yeah.
Is it? Yeah. Fine. Perfect.
Excellent. Anybody got anything else?
The thing you'll learn about me is that I'm not burdened with too much knowledge. I rely on.
It's the same for 21 then as well.
Yeah. Okay.
What about lifespan?
No, 20. Yeah, 21, 21, 22. The evidence of the evidence of the testing against
that one there.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. But product data sheets and things like that, that's fine, isn't it?
Yeah, that's fine.
Evidence that the right product system has been used.
Just jump back on. Can I jump back on 21? What are you actually trying to say there?
21.
The evidence of testing, or 22?
No, 22.
Materials, under materials, evidence of testing. What does that mean? I don't understand it.
I have to say I don't know. I wasn't the author.
That was mean. Uncalled for.
Are we testing material?
I didn't see materials. I see evidence of testing against specific AOV performance criteria.
So duplication of 17.
Yeah.
I think it needs to be in there. I think you need to take that out.
Okay.
Because it's under materials, I'm assuming it's something about the material that the thing is made out.
Yeah, because they're talking about dimensions, aren't they?
But then I would assume it was something like, will it get destroyed by UV light or something? I don't know, or. But it doesn't really seem to add anything to the document, as far as I can see there.
No, that's fine. The purpose of this session is to do exactly what you've just done there. Yeah.
It's to do exactly this.
And again, the product lifespan, yeah, that would be passive, because that would just be a lifetime based on the product specification, really, wouldn't it?
Exactly. That's why it's passive, I would say.
Yeah.
Can I highlight number 30, technical information on interface systems?
Yes.
Can we take out EVC, because emergency voice communication system has nothing to do with AOV. So I think in there you either need to just leave it blank or put in there fire alarm system.
Sprinkler.
you wouldn't interface a sprinkler with AOVs. It'll be the sprinklers will be interfaced with the fire alarm. So I just think that
you can interface a sprinkler with an AOV, because you can have a sprinkler for common areas, which can also be to make the access ingress for the fire brigade.
Yeah, but you wouldn't drive that from an AOV system. You drive that from a fire alarm or from
control.
You might have a sprinkler panel controlling. I mean, a fire alarm panel controlling the sprinkler system.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I'm just thinking that if we leave it blank, so that obviously whoever's responsible for that system per se has an idea of what it's interfaced in with, or we just be, like you say, be specific and say that, you know, ultimately these systems tend to be interfaced in with a fire alarm in order to drive the cause and effect, which may well then have a knock-on effect to things like sprinklers and you know, other kind of supplementary systems.
Yeah, and mechanical extracts within car parks as well.
Yeah.
I think just leaving it like it is with the because that could be lots of things. It could be interfaced with lots of things. So just leave it. Technical information on interface systems, and then leave it at that and say no more.
What I'm doing there.
Oh.
Okay.
Right.
We're almost at the end.
Would on 38 and 39, I mean, would you take out the if required? I mean, surely that should be a requirement. I get that there might be historic systems that have been installed by Joe Bloggs and Son, who you know, but last week was installing a heating system in someone's house. But should we take out the if required and kind of drive that message that it should be required?
I don't know. What do you think, Will?
Sorry, I think the most important thing looking at that is actually those are active, because when the building's in operation, then that information is. Sorry, we're just talking about installation and not maintenance, aren't we?
Yeah.
Okay, so in that instance, yeah, it's the regulations are coming through. There are schemes out there, so yeah, it's safer if you take. I agree. Take out if required, because that will need to be captured as part of the golden thread anyway.
If it's about installation, aren't they all passive? Because the spatial location is fixed in the installation, isn't it?
In that instance, it would be.
It's not letting me do it. So we'll
yeah.
Jess, can you make a note to take those out? Sorry.
Yep.
You put it in the chat. Jess.
Yeah, I agree. The third party accreditation is never going to change, is it?
I think they're all passive in installation because that's the baseline, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is the baseline of the golden thread, actually, isn't it?
Well, when you say they all, I mean, you'd certainly want, ideally, you'd want the installation instructions in a form that can be machine readable.
But that will be a product brochure, won't it? It will be.
Yeah, it shouldn't be, though, should it? It shouldn't be a product brochure. It shouldn't simply be a product brochure.
Yeah,
because
in terms of the product, the spatial location is a variable, isn't it? If you buy
absolutely
an AOV, where it goes in the building is always a variable.
Yes.
It's not a fixed data set for the product.
Not for the product, for the installation. This is under installation, Andy.
Yeah, but in BIM terms, installation isn't an asset, is it?
No. I'm not sure what you're saying there, Connor.
I'm agreeing with you. It's an active
right. Yeah, good.
Or variable component.
Yeah, good. Okay. Right.
inspection.
Sorry, just before moving on from installation, I'm just wondering, there might be situations in say older blocks, say for instance mansion blocks, 4 or 5 story blocks that would have been built say in the 50s, 60s, where they would have louvered vents that would have acted as smoke ventilation, but then following on from refurbishments, a fire assessor would have come along and specified an AOV system to be retrofitted. And I'm just wondering within that description there, if you would allow a line that, and I know for instance that a lot of installations are done where it's not specifically done per specification, but it's installed as a sort of, I don't know, as a sort of after effect to help the building with smoke ventilation. So would there be a situation where in that section that you would allow for some sort of bespoke
retro?
Yeah, sort of retro installation
Would you call it
of an AOV system?
Maybe call it an engineered system.
Yeah,
it doesn't specifically comply with the standards, but
yeah, definitely.
You've got a building that, like you say, like in the old mansion blocks, where you have to put something in that ultimately provides
improvement.
Yeah.
Is that not covered in 35?
Well, I suppose
what might be a good line then maybe would be to put another line in there to say, are there any maybe documentation that highlights deviations or variations against the standards based on an engineered system? That way, then that I mean, if we were designing an engineered,
that would be on the commissioning.
Well, it would.
Well, again, they wouldn't commission it because really, I mean, you sort of installing a system that would function. It meet the functional requirements of the building, but really wouldn't have been installed to say warranty guidelines and stuff wouldn't have really been met.
But as Josh says,
it's part of the commissioning.
35.
It is part of the commissioning, but I think in the purpose for if this is being used to kind of identify information, then surely if you've got 100 buildings that have got an AOV system in, if we're able to kind of even, like you say, like single out those ones that have got maybe an engineered deviated system.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah.
It'll be on the commissioning certificate. Totally agree with that. But then, like I say, I think it might be just to kind of, we have 100 systems.
Is it an engineered system?
Yeah, is it does or is there a that system deviates from the standards because of the type of building it is, or because you can't.
Yeah, bearing in mind that we've got to get it into this type of format, would you mind just, because we've only got 15 minutes left, would you mind, I think that's a really good point. Would you mind just typing in, sort of 10 words that encapsulate what you've just said? Put them into the chat.
Design, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it's more that from what I understand from what you just said, it's where the AOV is part of an engineered solution.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, let's press on. Anything on maintenance or inspection, for example? I mean, are you happy with the commissioning certificates? I think it's clear they should be passive or static.
Yeah.
Manufacturer's instructions, I think probably is reasonable to get them as PDFs.
Yeah.
Components, again, probably a PDF. I think, the others there, I think probably, I mean, you can obviously take maintenance instructions and interpret them into active data, which I think probably is what we should be doing or what should be done. But when it's actually delivered initially, then it should be in that format. Will, could you just show us very briefly your data sheet? Have you got one available? Have you got one to hand?
Yeah, hold on. What's the context in terms of this discussion?
I haven't seen one thing about battery backup. Secondary supply.
Is that coming through?
It is.
Yeah.
So this is straight off the website. So for instance, one of our what we call our tested solutions is with a company called Nordan. So we will have undertaken testing to 12101 with Nordan, sample declaration of performance there, and then the 3 profile types. So the Nordan Entech top swing, reversible, side hinged, and side hinge balcony door, and then click throughs to all the additional information that you'd need there. So that's
really most of that is just dimensional information.
yes.
So of the information that we've just been going through, would that be anywhere as a technical document?
Well, now you're talking more about the O&M information that backs that up. So yeah, that's the product data sheet at top level as a sales data sheet. But as you go through, then obviously there's more information that would start to bring in product specific and application project specific information. On.
So in that example, Will, you'd really want the information from the Nordan data sheet as well, wouldn't you?
There would be supplementary
so U values, air leakage, all that sort of stuff.
Absolutely.
Drops out of theirs.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Connor, do you have anything that you could show on that basis?
Yeah, sure.
As I said, I didn't see anything within there about batteries on your secondary supply.
It's a separate component.
That would be more to do with. Do you remember we're looking at the asset of the AOV, and then the battery supply is kind of one of those branches off. So that's the control system.
Right. Okay.
So this is the data sheet for a product it comes to site as a complete unit.
Yeah.
So there's a whole load of variants within that. So there's thermally broken, non-thermally broken, double glazed, single glazed, triple glazed, insulated, and so on. So when
sorry, carry on.
Go on.
I apologise. I was just going to say a lot of it's dimensional, isn't it?
A lot of it's dimensional, but when you get to the classifications, you're down into the aerodynamic values, the U value, classification, resistance to wind, resistance to rain, air permeability, method of control, infill types, glazing thicknesses, again, infill panels. Depth of frame is a variable depending. Well, no, it's consistent actually. It's opening angle usually consistent, and then the height and width, and the actual louver width is a variable there.
Okay, thank you. So this is the sort of information that would go into the O&M, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you'd have one of these uniquely for each product that would be installed.
Yeah. So when it's ordered up on the factory, you configure it depending on which variables you want to adopt, and that spits out the product at the end, and the declaration performance is generated on the end product.
The part of the challenge that I think we've got is that you, Will, and other AOV manufacturers will be producing this type of data, but there may not be. It may be that you include things here that Will doesn't, and vice versa. And the asset manager isn't going to know what they're going to be needing until they need it. So that's part of what we're trying to. I don't know how we boil this down, by the way, but
again, what it comes down to in that instance, George, is we've got to think like an asset manager. The information in here, in what's on the screen now, and in the data I was showing, is very much about product selection and product specification stage.
yes.
A lot of the data here really isn't going to be relevant
to the asset manager.
To the asset manager, it's nice to have, but from a day-to-day running point of view, it just isn't. And so really, it's critical information for early part, but once that building's handed over, then chances are this won't be looked at again.
And that's why the data that we're requiring in the guidance is as it is. So really, a lot of that information probably would need to be curated separately, albeit it can be static.
Yes, I mean, that's effectively what we're talking about, is each asset has its own story, has its own data set, and that's specific and unique to that building, because that's ultimately what the asset manager, the building operator, needs.
Yeah. Okay, good. All right, I think we need to move on now to the other sections. We've just got, oh crikey, we've only got 5 minutes left.
Yeah, I don't think that's happening.
Well,
do you want to put the document back up, please? Okay.
The great news is that we've had fantastic engagement, haven't we? So obviously,
we identified before the meeting, didn't we, that the most important question was question 2.
Yeah.
Which we've I think covered very, very well, and I think there'll be more with the new approach. I think because as you're all aware, it's not just about this meeting; it's about ongoing discussions, and we've certainly got a lot to discuss with people outside this meeting on this. Has anybody got anything they particularly want to share in the last few minutes? Any comments about our methodology or how we're working or what we're doing?
One thing we've come across recently with this sort of information, which is obviously great for everyone and everyone needs it, is where we've gone to a site where we've needed this information and a particular manufacturer / installer of that system. The site had lost the details. The site had no more records of the O&Ms and whatever else, and the installation / manufacturer would not provide that information again. Surely that should still be available at all times where possible.
I mean, definitely. That's does anybody, any of the manufacturers on the call, have a view on that?
I think that's the whole point of going down this digital route, isn't it? So it's always available. Historically, record keeping may not be as good as it should be. I can't obviously speak for the whole industry, but there will always be challenges in recovering information on products, particularly if it's been sold through a third party who might have called the project something completely different.
Yes.
So yeah, there will be challenges in doing that. Particularly in the way information was stored in the past.
Yeah, so I won't mention any names or anything like that, but this particular manufacturer weren't interested in helping unless they were doing the maintenance themselves on that new install.
What? Sorry, Ashley. What? Obviously, these issues was that also like from the installer as well. So the installer is saying, well,
it was the same person.
Oh, right, okay.
The installation firm was the manufacturer.
Right, and they're obviously not they're not maintaining it. So obviously they're
not
saying,
any
well,
longer.
we
don't
maintain it. Therefore,
didn't want to do it. They wouldn't give information out. Correct. Yes.
David Jones.
Yes. Just to share, I don't do very much site work now, but in my early days of CDM, one of the walking around sites, one of the things I used to find is when equipment was delivered onto sites, there was a manual that possibly that had been printed somewhere in either the Far East or some other country, and you find it's been discarded into the mud or something like that, or left on the scaffolding and whatever, I always made a point of picking that stuff up and putting it in the site manager's site office, so that it got into the O&M file. You know, a lot of the stuff there, it's far better to have it with a bit of mud on there and a bit of footprint than have nothing at all later on down the line.
Absolutely, absolutely. Anybody else? Pencho, you had your hand up. Now it's gone down.
Sorry, just just on the last point, we are obtaining that information as part of the regulation to TA. So that is actually the requirement to provide, to the main contractor to provide this information. Don't understand why they haven't actually provided, but this is one of the kind of,
yeah, no, in this case it obviously would have been provided, no doubt it would have been provided, but then that's gone to the main contractor has gone to the leaseholder's gone to the company who's now managing that site, and now where do they go to get that information? Because it just gets lost in the rigmarole, and that's the issue we found.
I think that's the challenge that we've got, is that, you know, with new build properties, obviously there's a much better process in place to obviously obtain and keep that information. But when you're going back to kind of historic buildings, normally, as I think David was saying, you know, all of those kind of O&M manuals and that were physically handed over to the client at the end, you should just go into some obscure cupboard in the basement, which has probably now been turned into a resident spa room or something. So you know, they've all been chucked out and used to, you know, to like recycling. So it's a challenge. It really is, and I feel your pain.
But not on a 2-year-old building.
Right, we've got 1.5 minutes left, and before you escape, George wants some volunteers.
Yeah, so if you found it useful today, then, and it's been very active, so I think there is a lot of interest.
Very active. A lot of participants, a lot of people talking. It's great.
Yeah, we're happy to. I mean, just to be clear, we're all volunteers. So I'm volunteering and you're volunteering. So obviously we want to try and make the most of the hour and a half that you've already spent, but also build on the other stuff. So what I think would be perhaps useful is, some people will be interested in the data, and you know, going through, as we were doing, the individual properties and things like that. So what I'm thinking is that if you're interested in participating going forward with things, then let's if you type in your name into the chat and just say that you'd like to. I'm thinking perhaps we look at process, data, and what does anybody else think? Does anybody else have a view as to how we divvy this up?
You say data, process. What about application?
That's good. That's good. So, and it might be that you don't have to choose which, but it might be that we run another couple of sessions like this, but with a smaller group that is interested in maybe doing a little bit of just review. If we break it down into small sections, it might be that, you know, you can put an hour's work in and have an impact. The other thing that I would ask is that what we're trying to do is influence the way the industry is procuring and managing and delivering the services.
Yeah.
So if you've got people that are in the construction companies, perhaps design engineers or design managers, or people that you're connecting with, if you want us to involve them in this process, then let us know who they are, because all of the major all the major contractors, I think, pretty much are active members of BIM4Housing. But at the end of the day, it comes down to people. So the people that we're dealing with, who might be involved in defect management or detailed construction or design, they may not be the people that you're dealing with. so if you feel that yes, that maybe your customers or the people that you're interfacing with could benefit from some of the brilliant thinking that we've had going on, then just let us know, because we can hook them in. Would that be interesting? At the end of the day, we're a community. So are people typing into the chat? I can't see what's happening. So have we got any volunteers?
I'm just putting my name in, but I'm just trying to get it.
Thank you, David.
Sorry, what
Yeah,
were
I've heard that one before.
What were the three elements again? Data,
process, and
application.
George, I've got to go. I've got another meeting I've got to go to. I put my name in. Apologies. Thanks.
Cheers, mate.
Nice to see you.
Brilliant. Thanks very much.
Bye.
And Ian, I think it would be good if you were able to contribute, because I can tell Paul White then you're on board.
Everybody's busy typing. Okay, George, have you got anything else?
No, I think that's all at the moment.
Well, what an excellent meeting. Thank you all very, very much. And I hope we'll see you all very soon, hopefully in some of the other roundtables over the next couple of weeks.
Good.
If not, see you then. Cheers.
Thank you. Cheers.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody.
Cheers, guys.
Carry on
Thanks.
typing.
Bye.
Carry on typing.
cheers all.
Right.